Hello and welcome to Bloomberg Quint Live, and you're watching Trend Spotting. I'm Navneet Saluja D'Souza.
Good morning, Navneet. I'm Agam Vakil, and in the next 30 minutes, we deep dive into specific trends in the markets to draw out key takeaways and their implications for investors. First, the headlines. Markets vary ahead of the RBI policy, with both benchmark indices trading mixed. Broader markets outperformed. India Volatility Index declines. The Street eyes the last Monetary Policy Committee meet of the current fiscal. Just 1 out of 33 economists polled by Bloomberg expect the MPC to hike rates by as much as 35 basis points. And the US FDA conducts a surprise inspection at Kerala's Moraiya plant. That's a Bloomberg Quint exclusive. The Supreme Court quashes all iron ore mining licenses renewed by the Goa government, says new tenders have to be invited for 88 mines. And among key earnings today, we have Cipla, Aurobindo, Pharma and Eicher Motors, which will post their quarterly numbers.
All right, let's take a look as to what's happening with the markets. Well, we thought there was some respite when the markets opened today, but we've given up all the gains. So now it's the 7th straight day of losses coming in for Nifty, Bank Nifty, and Bank Nifty is also under pressure. Reason being there's monetary policy. So in the second half, probably there could be another spell of volatility that one could witness in the markets. But talking about the volatility, India VIX has definitely cooled off today after surging nearly 25% in yesterday's session. India VIX is currently trading around the levels of 19. Well, in terms of sectoral indices, you've got the Nifty Bank, the Nifty IT, and also PSU banking and the private banking space. All of them have seen some cuts coming about, but holding on to the gains. The Nifty Realty Index currently is your top sectoral gainer with gains of nearly 1.6%. Quickly, I'll just take you through a couple of the Nifty gainers. The oil marketing companies have been doing pretty well. So HPCL is your top gainer on Nifty, and not only HPCL, actually BPCL and IOC are also among the top 10 gainers on Nifty. Aurobindo Pharma, ahead of its earnings today, has seen gains of 2.5%. And remember, earnings are expected to be good because there is a bit of margin expansion that our poll is throwing about for the third quarter. ONGC, Coal India, Tata Motors seems to have rebounded from yesterday's losses. Whereas on the losing side, you've got HCL Technologies, Bharti Airtel, and the biggies, HDFC Bank and HDFC, both of them continue to reel under pressure, and HUL is also trading in the red, Agam.
Well, Navneet, as far as the advance decline ratio in the Nifty 500 is concerned, it's quite the reverse of what we saw yesterday. So today we have about nearly 420 stocks which are advancing on the Nifty 500, that is, as against 80 stocks on the decline. When it comes to National Stock Exchange stats as well, the advances outperform the declines by quite a margin. So, that's a positive. We're looking at MTNL, which is gaining 10% in today's job trade, and that's followed by Century Plyboards. It's also advancing by nearly 9%. We have gains in Ahluwalia Contracts, Bajaj Electricals, as well as Bhushan Steel. Bajaj Electricals in this case stands out because of, contract win. On the losing end, we have weakness in Natco Pharma. Vakrangi now locked in a lower circuit of around 5%. Redington India, InfoEdge India, as well as DB Realty showing some amount of losses, but by and large, once again, the complexion of the market has changed towards the positive.
All right, that's about the markets. But before we get to the trend spotting headlines, the Supreme Court has decided to reject all iron ore mining renewals given by the Goa government. Well, the order, which has the potential to impact players like Vedanta, who have a huge presence in the state, has called for fresh tenders on 88 mines. Arpan Chaturvedi, who was in the courtroom when the order was read out, joins us now on the phone line with all the details. Arpan, what's the road ahead from here?
That's right. So basically, this relates to your mining renewal that was done in the year 2015 by the Goa government. The Supreme Court, then there was a petition challenging those renewals by Goa Foundation NGO, and post that, of course, they alleged a lot of host of procedural irregularities, and the court, of course, seems to have accepted their arguments. We'll get to know the detailed judgment once it is uploaded, but as of now, all mining leases that were renewed in the state of Goa have been quashed. The Supreme Court has said that all these licenses should now be granted afresh, or the leases should be granted afresh. So that is the next step that Goa government will take. That's what's going to happen next. And of course, till then, the Supreme Court has said that from March 15, after March 15 is the last day till when mining can be done in Goa. After that, all of this has to stop, and then fresh leases have to be given.
All right, Arpan, thanks for giving us those updates. Of course, we'll keep following with respect to what's happening on these orders that have been coming through, especially for the metal pack. But moving on, of course, as far as these metal counters are concerned, there has been some amount of weakness, at least for the likes of Vedanta. Not as much for some of its peers, such as Hindalco or JSW, for that matter.
I think Vedanta has the maximum exposure in Goa. And I think this case dates back to 2012 when all the mines were shut, and I guess they got some sigh of relief in 2015. But once again, looks like companies like Vedanta could come under pressure. Well, they all have to obtain the environment clearance, is what the court order also states. All right, let's move ahead. On Transporting today, will Cipla and Aurobindo Pharma deliver a healthy quarter this time around? We asked Purvi Shah of Sharekhan. What helped Berger Paints paint a healthy December quarter? We asked the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer Abhijit Roy. And how have the fund flow trends been in the month of January? We cover all of this over the next 30 minutes for you. Okay, I think we're going back to the iron ore case which has just come out, where the Supreme Court has quashed all the mining leases in the state of Goa. Let's get the petitioner for the Goa mining case. Prashant Bhushan is joining us on the phone line now. Mr. Bhushan, good morning and thanks a lot for joining us. Could you take us through what happened exactly in the court today? Because I remember this case actually dates back to 2012 when all the mining leases were quashed and some relief was given in 2015.
Yes, you see, in 2012, the Supreme Court had held that all the mining leases in Goa had completed their 50 years long ago in 2007 itself, and therefore they had become invalid, and that now only fresh mining leases could be given, and even fresh environmental clearances would be required. Now, instead of doing that, what the Goa government did was that just 1 week before the new Mining Act came into force, which was in January 2015, they renewed leases of 88 mining lessees, which the Supreme Court had already declared illegal, and they said fresh mining leases would have to be given. Yet they renewed it in order to avoid this auction. So a huge largesse worth literally lakhs of crores was given to these existing lessees by way of these renewals for 20 years, and that has been set aside today by the Supreme Court as being totally illegal, contrary to the Supreme Court's earlier order, MLF-ID, etc. And they have said now the government will have to grant fresh mining leases according to the new law, which requires auction, and thereafter these leases will require fresh environmental clearances from the Ministry of Environment.
Bhushan, what I want to understand, the existing 88 leases which are there in the state of Goa, do they not have the environment clearance?
No, they originally had environmental clearance, but that environmental clearance had been virtually quashed by the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court had said that you have to grant fresh leases and the fresh lessees will have to obtain fresh environmental clearances. Instead of doing that, they renewed the earlier leases and renewed their earlier environmental clearance. All that has been set aside, and therefore now fresh leases by way of auction and thereafter fresh environmental clearances will have to be obtained.
The existing mines will have time till March 15th is what the order also states, Mr. Bhushan. Yes. But is there any timeline which has been given post that? How much time will it take for the auction to start and mining to restart again?
Now, that will take considerable amount of time. It's not something which can be done in a great hurry, because thereafter fresh environmental clearances will also have to be obtained. It will take at least, in my view, at least minimum 6 months. It can't be done in less than 6 months.
Okay, I think, Mr. Bhushan, we have our colleague Arpan Chaturvedi also joining us. Arpan, please go ahead if you have anything to ask to Mr. Bhushan.
Mr. Bhushan, I just wanted to check in one more thing, that earlier now the Supreme Court has cancelled these licenses on certain procedural grounds. Going next, when the licenses are fresh will happen, is there any specific guidelines that the court has laid out from their end, or will it just be as per the MMRD Act?
Okay, I think we've lost that line of Mr. Bhushan. We'll try and reconnect again. Arpan, we'll get in touch with you once the line is connected with Mr. Bhushan. But as what he stated was, there is no specific timeline which is being given post March 15. The order says all the 88 mining leases will be quashed and the mines have got time till March 15. Then there will be fresh auction. No timeline given for that. But he also stated it could take, almost 6 to 7 months for fresh auctions to take place. And remember, they have to obtain the environmental clearance again, all the 88 mines. But I guess Nikki is right here with us. Nikki, what's the impact on Vedanta? Because I remember this was first all the mines were actually cancelled in 2012. Shah Commission had laid down some conditions for it, but some relief in 2015. But was it expected again that they will quash all the mining leases?
Yeah, so there has been back and forth on this case, as you've rightly pointed out. In 2012, we did see some kind of ban coming in on the 88 license, on 88 mines that have been given these licenses. Again, in 2015, as you just mentioned, these were, again, the state government went ahead and renewed these licenses. We were not expecting, again, such kind of environmental norms coming in back in picture. But then if you look at the impact, what Vedanta could finally have on this now, iron ore as a business.
Only Vedanta has exposure there.
Yeah,
no other.
Because it's a low-quality iron ore.
It's the category C iron ore.
I have to interrupt you here. I think we have Mr. Bhushan again. If you have any questions for Mr. Bhushan, please go ahead.
Sir, I'd like to understand, this is Nikki here. I've been closely following this case. I'd like to understand if you've read through the document and what kind of production do you think will be knocked off from the state of Goa after this move, after 88 licenses have been scrapped?
What kind of corruption will be?
No, what kind of production will go out of the system from the state of Goa as a whole?
Yeah. You see, this was a totally corrupt decision to renew all these mining leases. In fact, it is worse than Colgate in my view. At least in Colgate, there was some screening committee through which these lessees had been selected. Here, the old lessees who had been continuing for the last 70 years, they were just granted a renewal whose leases had been cancelled by the Supreme Court, had been declared to have expired, where fresh leases had to be given. The same people were given 20 years fresh leases without any taking any money, without any auction, without recovering any money for the state. So this was a totally corrupt decision in my view. And this shows that this was taken just 1 week before the new act came, which obliges auction. In order to obviate auction, they took this decision, this Parikar government of the BJP.
I believe that should be closely reading what has come through in the judgment. I'd like to understand which are the companies that get impacted from this development. I understand Vedanta does have a significant...
Yeah, Vedanta and many other old these other lessees also, the ones who had been continuing for a long time.
What quantum of production will actually go for a toss with this kind of scrap which has come through for Vedanta, if I may just ask?
No, I think production would certainly be substantially affected. But in any case, they were saying that the production from Goa was of inferior quality ore. It was all being exported. Essentially, it was being exported, not being used in India.
All right. Also, sir, what explains the back and forth that is going in the case? Because first in 2012, you saw this the judgment coming through.
So 2012 should have been the end of it. Thereafter, they should have auctioned the leases. Instead of auctioning them, they just renewed them without charging them anything at all, and renewed their environmental clearance also.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for your time. We'll leave it at that.
All right, thanks Mr. Bhushan for joining us. Nikki, thanks to you as well for giving us those updates and taking us through the developments. Of course, so we will keep tracking these developments from time to time as and how we see the news come in. But with that, we will move across to earnings. Two major drug makers, that is Cipla and Aurobindo Pharma, will be reporting their December quarter earnings today. And while the two pharma majors are likely to remain in the pink of health in the third quarter, what is the street estimating? Let's get an analyst view. We have Purvi Shah, research analyst at Sharekhan, joining us. Purvi, I'm going to start off with your expectations on Cipla. If you could take us through what your anticipation is with respect to the headline numbers and what you also anticipating.
Yeah, so Cipla, we expect around 14% top line growth with sales number coming to around 4,150 odd crores. And the operating margins, we expect an improvement of around 130 basis points, which is likely to come in around 19.5 or 20 odd percent. And the profit growth is expected to be 10% at around 410 crore. As we know that the company has got launched a couple of approvals and launched some products like Dacogen and Renvela and Pulmicort. The effect, I guess, Pulmicort was a bigger one, and since it got an approval in somewhere in November, the full sales would be captured in the upcoming quarter. So that's something that yes, we expect the numbers to be good.
Purvi, what about Aurobindo Pharma? The stock's actually doing well ahead of its numbers, and if I look at what the Bloomberg poll is throwing about, we're expecting an uptick of almost 14% when it comes to the bottom line and slight bit of margin expansion. What are the numbers that you're factoring in for the December quarter earnings from Aurobindo?
Yeah, so on the Aurobindo, we expect a 10% growth to 4,300 crores. Now, that's basically because, as we know, that Cipla has entered into the Renvela, and that's a product that Aurobindo had first mover advantage in Q2. So this quarter we expect some competition setting in because of that. So and we expect the operating margins to be better in the range of 24 to 24.5% with profit growth of almost 20% to 675 crores.
Purvi, were there any new product launches by Aurobindo Pharma in US and the European Union for the December quarter?
So for the quarter, they have indicated that injectables business is something that they are banking on for this quarter as well as the upcoming quarters. So that's something that we may have to monitor very closely, because the company has said that they'll be launching almost 20 to 25 products annually. So it's a big thing that could probably help them to offset some pricing pressure that's been seen in the US.
Okay, Purvi, staying with Aurobindo, again, with respect to whatever management says, because we know we don't have a press conference or anything for Aurobindo Pharma, but what would you be looking for after the earnings are out with respect to any messages that the management wants to send out to the shareholders?
I think so. An update on the debt front is something that the street would be expecting from the management. That's basically because it has, though the debt equity ratio is just 0.4, but the number in terms of rupees is like around 4,800 crores. That's up. So that's something that the street would like the management to address as to how do they cater to it. And the other thing probably is the injectables pipeline and what are the kind of big product launches that are coming up in the upcoming quarters is something that we'll be looking at. Since the company usually has this results in the late evening, and the call will be tomorrow morning, so it's just
right. Purvi, so far the numbers which we've seen from the pharma pack has more or less disappointed. Yesterday, Lupin's number also disappointed on the bottom line. The operating performance was not so great, and especially I think the US side of the business of Lupin didn't do well. If I were to ask you in the pharma pack, since most of the stocks have not done well in the last 1 year because of the pricing pressures in the US market, which is the one which at current valuations an investor can look to buy?
I guess Aurobindo, Devious and Biocon are something that we like in terms of valuation as well as for a longer run. That's basically because a lot of the things are sorted from these three companies, wherein there are a lot of triggers that could help them post good numbers also.
Purvi, with respect to Cipla, are there any concerns that you would use as red flags that could be an issue with respect to the stock price going forward?
I wouldn't say it a concern exactly, but something that we would like to hear about is about the inhalers product basket that we'd like to have an update as to how is it moving, because in the last 2 quarters at least the management has highlighted that it's picking up very slow comparative to what they had expected. So is there any ramp up is something that we'll be looking at, and in case if that doesn't happen, that could be seen as a red flag probably, because that's something which distinguishes them from the other players in the US market.
Okay, Purvi, we'll let you go on that note. Thanks a lot for joining us today and taking us through the expectations of both the key pharma majors who will be declaring their December quarter numbers today. While talking about the earnings, Berger Paints has reported a strong set of numbers for the December quarter, with its bottom line seeing a jump of nearly 19%. Well, what have been the key contributors to the company's healthy quarter? Let's ask the management. Joining us on the phone line is the Managing Director and CEO of the company, Mr. Abhijit Roy. Mr. Roy, good morning to you and thanks a lot for joining us today on Bloomberg Quint.
Good morning.
Could you tell us how much was the volume growth, or what sort of contribution in the top line has come in from the volume growth and from the price hikes, if any, which were taken in the December quarter?
Well, we didn't take any price hike in the December quarter, but the beginning of the year we had taken a price hike. So that had an impact. Effect of about 2.5% to 3% due to the price hike.
All right, Mr. Roy, can you tell us about how your premium segment is doing in comparison to the economy segment? What kind of trends are you tracking, and what does it mean for product mix as we move ahead into the next couple of quarters?
Well, we have been focusing on the premium segment a bit more in largely. Our good.
Okay, I think we have a problem with Mr. Roy's line, so we will reconnect with him. But for now, what looks like is that when it comes to Berger Paints, Asian Paints, and for that matter, Kansai Nerolac, to a certain extent, the hit in terms of margins is not as severe as one might have expected. So that's your 3-month movement. Of course, it's been largely flattish because we really haven't seen too much, and we've seen a lot of volatility with respect to the markets as a whole. A lot of this has to do with the fact that you've seen a lot of traction in the consumption sector in general. But if you do consider the way volumes have panned out, they have, of course, been better, but this is largely on account of a low base in demonetization. On the other hand, while there was an expectation from the street that there could be some pressure on account of crude-linked input costs, that has not really played out. And in fact, at least for this particular quarter, a lot of these companies have been, should I say, shielded from the severe impact of the crude-linked input costs. That said, in terms of bottom line, as you can see in case of Berger Paints, we've seen about 19% growth here as well. So it's actually turned out to be a reasonably good quarter for Berger Paints. Navneet.
Okay, and that's the reason, I guess, the stocks also reacted positively. I think we have Mr. Roy back with us. Mr. Roy, if you could hear us, we were asking if there was any sort of pressure on the cost side, because we've seen the crude oil prices going up in the last few months. So what sort of impact was seen in terms of your margins with regard to a rise in crude prices?
Yeah, the cost has gone up, a little bit in terms of not so much on the crude, as yet, but more so because of titanium dioxide and monomer prices, which are constituents of our raw material. So there has been an impact on the cost side, but that will be passed on to consumers. We have already announced a price increase effective 1st March of about 1.5%, which should cover the total cost hike.
And Mr. Roy, in the past, you have spoken about expansion in production. What can you tell us, and can you give us any updates with respect to that?
Well, that's the stream. We have expanded. One plant we have put up in the northeast, and then another one in Bijuri near Pune for the industrial unit, which is being expanded again now. So those are on course, and will be completed as per schedule.
And was there any revival that was seen in the rural market in the December quarter? Because I guess that was a market where there was a bit of degrowth which was seen post demonetization.
Yeah, that has changed a little bit. Now it's much better. Back to normal, I would say, though it can be even better than what we have seen so far. The budget has given, some amount of impetus to the rural growth. I presume it will take some time, but, we hope that the rural demand will pick up further from here on.
Okay, final question from my side, Mr. Roy. You do have a very robust distribution network, but what is Berger Paints doing to expand that, considering your anticipation of demand as we move into the next 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, we do have a strong distribution network, but we are substantially behind the leader in this area. And this is one of our, relatively weak areas, I would say, which needs to be improved upon, and we are working on that.
Right. Mr. Roy, before I let you go, just want to check, any plans of taking any sort of price hike in the upcoming quarters?
On 1st of March, we are taking a price increase of about 1.5%.
1.5%?
That's right.
All right, Mr. Roy, we leave it at that note. Thanks a lot for joining us and taking us through the December quarter earnings of Berger Paints, which were pretty strong, and we've seen the stock also reacting positively. Well, let's move on and take a look at how have the fund flow trends been in the first month of the year. Jayesh Khilnani joins us with all the details. Jayesh, over to you.
So mutual fund flows have been restored to normal after a blip that we saw for the month of December, which actually recorded a record outflow number for the month itself. Now let's have a look at what the inflow number stood for the month of Jan 2018. That came in at about 1,06,000 crores for the month. At December, I was telling you that we had a record outflow number of about 1.64 lakh crores, and November also saw about 1.2 lakh crores being infused. So this is the third straight month that we are seeing where either more than 1 lakh crores has been pumped into the market or removed from the market. In terms of the equity flows, that has seen a steady decline over the past few months. So for Jan 2018, we saw an inflow number of about 15,390 crores. Mind you, this is a combination of equity assets plus the equity ELSS schemes that we have. That actually saw a huge jump of about 70% for the month and nearly stands at nearly 2,000 crores. For December, we had got an inflow number of about 16,087 crores, which was once again 20% lower from the previous month itself. In terms of the asset under management that we have, so Jan 2018 asset under management stands at about 22.4 lakh crores, which is marginally higher from the December number, but still away from the November high that we saw for total assets under management. In terms of the equity assets that we have now, that stands at about 7.86 lakh crores, which is marginally up from the 7.7 lakhs that we saw for the month of December, and substantially higher from the month of November 2017. So all in all, it looks like that equity flows and the net inflows into mutual funds have been restored after a blip that we saw in the month of December.
Absolutely, Jayesh. Thanks a lot for joining us and giving us those details. We will be tracking more of these numbers with as and how we see the months pass through. But moving on, Maruti Suzuki kicked off the 14th edition of the Auto Expo with its concept vehicle. The event will have 23 automakers showcase their vehicles over the next 5 days, and the event will provide for a platform for automakers to showcase various electric vehicles as a part of the government's vision to make India an all-electric vehicle country. Hyundai too has unveiled its new Elite i20, while Renault unveiled its Trezor electric car. But with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Trend Spotting. Lots more lined up, so don't go anywhere. Stay tuned in the Bloomberg Quint.